Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Last Thursday saw Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake presenting the budget proposal for 2017 to Parliament. Now, throughout this show today, we considered how this augurs for the business community of Sri Lanka, for the common man, and of course for entrepreneurs. My final round and the first question goes to Mr. Suleiman Nistar, partner Ernst & Young, SL. Mr. Nistar, in terms of taxation in Sri Lanka, are we headed in the right direction when we take the business community, entrepreneurs, and the general public?
In the right direction, meaning, I think looking at it in the perspective of the economy today and the need to finance both recurring expenditure as well as capital expenditure. We have been lagging behind in terms of tax revenue, and the proposals that have been put forward are in terms of bridging that gap to some extent, whilst not having a major impact on the taxpayer as well, given that VAT was done and dusted with in the last budget and prior to this budget. The proposals given are targeting those who more or less can afford it, or it's not having a significant impact overall when you look at it on average on the general public, is my take on it. So I would presume that yes, we are moving in the right direction in that context.
Trade unions say that the 2017 budget is worrying for the working classes. Do you agree with this statement?
See, from an individual's perspective, you wouldn't pay any tax if you had 100,000 rupees salary a month, right? Whether it be in the government sector or the private sector. If you earn 100,000 or less, you wouldn't pay a cent of tax, direct tax, right? Of course, you will have the VAT and all the purchases. So to that extent, there is no impact. So it was 50,000 a month, moved up to 100,000. And then incrementally it goes up in slabs of 6 lakhs at 4, 8, 12 and so forth. So for the working classes, if you are within that range, there is no significant impact in this.
You're talking about the direct taxes.
Direct taxes, that's right. So indirect taxes, again, there have been no major changes to VAT, other than maybe milk powder, the exemption was removed. But that also came in the last, it's not part of this budget, it's part of the last budget's issues that were brought into effect in November. So what has really gone up in this budget in terms of indirect taxes would be on, I think, certain increases in liquor and that kind of expenditure, but otherwise not a significant increase.
Can Sri Lanka be hopeful given the 2017 budget proposal? We saw that the bus owners associations and three-wheeler owners associations were threatening to stage a strike action commencing midnight today. However, it has been called off. Do you think that there is a risk that people are dissatisfied with this budget, or do you think that this budget is the way forward?
There would be certain areas that may be impacted. I think the bus owners association, primarily that fine, right?
The 2,500
that was coming in, and that has been resolved now. I think the last SMS that I got. So specific industries being significantly affected, I don't really see. I think this was the major one that came up, and it has been resolved now. So from the working classes point of view, not a significant impact, no.
All right, thank you very much. I move my attention to Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. In terms of the budget, you have the revenue and the expenditure. You also have the interest rates and the exchange rates. Could you very briefly, Dr. Vijayawardena, in 3 minutes, explain to us how the equilibrium between the exchange rates and the interest rates has to be maintained in order to ensure that the budget is successful?
Well, Sonali, it will be the other way about, because if you have a big budget deficit, where the government will be borrowing from the market to finance the budget, it will have an impact on the interest rates, and interest rates would naturally should go up in the market. And when the monies are spent on consumption by the government and not on production, people will get money into their pockets and they will start spending that money, and that part of the spending will be for the imported goods, which will create a deficit in the balance of payments, and that deficit will first be financed out of the reserves that we are having, foreign reserve, and if we don't have reserve, then we have to allow the exchange rate to depreciate. So the budget deficits have been the cause of interest rate increases as well as the depreciation of the currency, rather than the interest rates and the budget deficit to be, the exchange rate would be causing budgets to have deficits. So but in this case, what we see is if the Minister of Finance is able to maintain his budgetary targets by reducing the budget deficit to 3% of GDP by year 2020, there won't be a significant impact on the market interest rates as well as on the exchange rate of the country. So therefore, what we have to do is we have to support the Minister of Finance to realize his budget targets, so that the minister will be able to maintain the budget deficit at 3% of GDP by year 2020, and possibly he might go for a budget balance in the next few years and then convert it into a surplus. If he can do so, the budget will be completely neutral on the interest rate structure as well as the exchange rate of the country.
Dr. Vijayawardena, one final question to you. In your opinion, is budget 2017, has it been prepared to appease the IMF?
In a way, yes. I mean, there are certain conditions that we have imposed on ourselves. As I mentioned at the beginning, Sonali, the conditions had not been imposed on us by the IMF. It is we who have informed the IMF in our letter of intent that Sri Lanka has a problem. To solve the problem, Sri Lanka is going to take a very positive course of action, and all these positive course of action would be directed towards consolidating the budget in the first instance. I mean, all other things like reforming the public sector enterprises and going for a market-based exchange rate, going for an inflation targeting in Sri Lanka, those are outside the budget. So so we have informed the IMF that we would be consolidating the budget, and one of the key areas of consolidation is we have to increase the revenue as a percent of GDP. At the same time, we have to cut down the budget deficit to the target levels, and borrowings also to a level. Therefore, I don't say that it would be actually meeting the requirements of the IMF. Those requirements have been specified by ourselves.
Right, thank you very much. And finally, Shiran Fernando, does budget 2017 augur well for Sri Lanka's economy?
I think it does, relative to 2016. I think that's the most important part. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is one step forward, and with the implementation of the good proposals, the good revenue proposals, getting the taxes collected, improving. I think what's important in this budget is not the deficit targets being meeting, because what you've seen, for example, with 2016 budget is public investments as a percentage of GDP. Last year was forecasted to be about 7% of GDP. The number, when you actually look at it this year, has come down to 4.1. So that's how you can meet the budget deficit targets. What's more important is whether these revenue numbers are growing, and that will actually determine the success of it. Beyond that, I think implementing will be key, but for me, I think most important is what will happen externally. And in this budget, actually, there's a line which says we're also mindful that the external sector holds many uncertainties that could have a negative impact towards revenue collection. So the government is actually mindful of the fact that external factors could actually jolt this progress that you've achieved in 2017 or hoping to achieve.
So accelerating growth with social inclusion, is that a realistic target to set? Or do you think it should consider the factor of sustainability?
As I think Nadim mentioned about survival and keeping things going, keeping the boat sort of floating, I think that's more of the theme for 2017. The growth will accelerate, for example, if, as Dr. Vijayavardhan has said, $1 billion comes into the port. That sort of eases a lot of the borrowing concerns that Sri Lanka has, and then you can be able to take on more infrastructure projects or prioritize certain things that earlier you put to the back burner. So that's where the acceleration will come in, and Budget 2017 sort of hopefully will lead to that.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for being on our panel tonight. Mrs. Suleiman Nistar, partner, Ernst & Young, Sri Lanka; Dr. W.A. Vijayavardhan, former Deputy Governor, Central Bank; and Sharon Fernando, lead economist at Frontier Research. I'd also like to thank Nadim Majid, Chaturanga Hapuarachi, and Charita Fernando for joining us on tonight's show. We'd like to leave you with a quote from the 45th President-elect of the United States of America. In his victory speech, Donald J. Trump said, "We will embark upon a project of national growth and renewal. I will harness the creative talents of our people, and we will call upon the best and brightest to leverage their tremendous talent for the benefit of all. We have a great economic plan. We will double our growth and have the strongest economy anywhere in the world." Could we too in Sri Lanka do the same? Will Budget 2017 be successful in achieving the sustainability and the economic growth that we all need? Only time will tell. Thanks for joining us. Good night.